Boom, baby. Here we are in the AM. It is way too early in the morning. Phil, I'm crashing your party, bro. Is that okay?
Good good morning. How are you doing? Yeah, everything's we're all good. We have a weekly um talking about games, getting our January update in, talking about what we finished, talking about what we beat. And here we go. Why don't you kick us off?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, what are you drinking this morning? I mean, you got a warm
Yeah,
cup of coffee? Is it tea? Like
I
what are
do.
you rocking this morning?
I do. I have a nice cup of coffee. I have a nice cup of coffee with some coconut creamer because I'm trying not to do dairy as much.
Good
And
job. Dairy's hard to
because
cut
we're
out, man.
Yeah, it is because we're getting old and the gut doesn't like dairy anymore. So, yeah, man, it's a nice little coconut creamer from Target.
Dude, I have to say we used to be way cooler because now it's just like, oh yeah,
We,
no, I can't even handle dairy. Like that cheese,
yeah,
no, it's gonna mess up my entire system.
yeah, you're screwed for an entire week. Yeah, so nice little cup of Joe
Yeah,
this morning.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I have to say that I totally am crashing your party this morning, partly because you inspired me this week, man. You have been doing it up right, waking up early, putting in the hours, basically running circles around me game wise, which has never been the case. I don't know how to feel about it, but you are putting down more content than I am, and I'm highly impressed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's always look as older gamers and as parents, it's hard to find time to game. And that's something that has been sort of the cornerstone of what you and I have talked about since we began talking about games together a little over a year ago. And so coming into the new year, right, we all had our New Year's resolutions, and mine was simply to do the infamous get up early. I do not enjoy getting up early. I do not like it. It is not my favorite thing. But as far as like having hobbies and creating content and making videos and talking games and even playing games, morning time seems to be the one time where, hey, look, everyone's still asleep. The day has not started yet. There's time in the morning where that has not been penciled in for you as a parent, as a dad, as a husband to get things done. And if you want to have a level of consistency, the morning is always there, right? Because you never know what plans you're going to have. You don't know what you're going to do in the evening. Are you going to go watch a movie? You're going to go hang out. You're going to go to this after school event or something of that nature. So the morning is where the most consistency lies. And I've been trying to use gaming and we'll see. I mean, this is only the fourth day in. So I'm not going to give myself credit until I get about 20 days in. But this is this was my pathway to success. Was going to be waking up early, an hour and a half. If we can get an hour and a half in, and then at some point, as I get used to waking up early, like I was back in my school days, if I can get used to waking up early, you can expand that to 2 hours. And 2 hours is a long time. You can get a
Yeah.
lot done. You get a lot of games played, as you've seen with the games that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that like even knowing that this was coming in the morning, I was up at like 4 a.m. just like, oh, it's time. It's time to get up. It's time to get up. Like I was looking forward to it in a way that I haven't like looked forward to waking up in a handful of days now. So that was really cool. That was really cool. And I wouldn't have thought to like slide it into this morning hour, but so far so good.
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult. Yeah, it can for sure can be difficult, and it's definitely not easy. But I mean, I can say from my early analysis here that it feels good to have 7:30 roll around and have something marked off your list already, and to be in a position where you know I can do that, where like I have a job where I can do that, where it's not like I'm not getting ready to go at 5 in the morning. I'm super blessed, and so for me, getting up in the morning is almost like, hey, I'm gonna do something that sucks as a thank you to myself and to the world or whatever to say like I'm not gonna miss this opportunity. I'm not going to I'm not going to like waste it
I'm
and I
not
recognize how important it is.
I'm not gonna miss my shot, as Alexander Hamilton once said in a play that I saw, which had to be accurate.
on yeah on the Disney Channel.
Yes,
Yes,
too.
which great play by the way.
Great, great play, great play.
Um
I mean, you're a connoisseur
yeah.
of plays. I'm just like a fair weather play person, and now my daughter's in plays, so now I have to like gain an appreciation for them. So here we go.
Yeah, well, I've
Yeah,
become because of my pastimes, I have become quite the connoisseur of play. So at this point, I'm becoming, somewhat of an expert,
I love that. I
a
love that.
play expert, if you will.
Well, I mean, I think this is the goal of the morning is to kind of wake up slow, ease into our day. And what I want to kind of hop into, I'm going to throw you a couple of curveballs today, but we're going to wake up slow and do something fun. So, what I do every morning I wake up is I listen to like a 10-minute podcast on a roundup of what's going on in the world. And sometimes it's really heavy and sometimes it's really light. But today, what I want to do is just talk about like the front page of Reddit, right? That's where all the viral comes from. So let's see what's going on in the world of gaming in the last 24 hours. So first things first, kind of like running through here, the second story listed on Reddit. I need to dial in my settings. Right now it's set to hot. But the second headline here reads, Harmonix is ending its Rock Band DLC release after 16 years. 2,800 songs. Man, if you would have told me 10 years ago that Rock Band was still releasing content, I would have told you you're bat crazy. Like, there is no way that anybody expected this thing to run for as long as it did. That's pretty impressive, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for what system? I
I'm
mean,
guessing.
have they really been pushing this out for the PS3 and PS4? I mean, look, I have always thought that this was a prime example of people running something into the ground.
Mhm.
Because I remember having Rock Band. I had Guitar Hero back in the day. The peripherals were really cool. It was a great party game. If you were in your 20s, you could get some friends together and have a few drinks, and like someone was on the guitar and two people were on the guitar, one person was on the vocals and someone was on the drums. But like they were so relentless about how much content that they released that I eventually was like, I'm so tired of this. So the fact that they continued on and on, I mean, yeah, kudos to them for being able to do that for so long.
I agree. And like at some point you would think they would run out of content. You know what I mean? Like there's only so many games that you can, or so many songs that you can remix and put into a Rock Band scenario and make it feel good. But shoot, 2,800, you're playing like all of them. Like there's got to be some Lady Gaga in there. There's got to be stuff that you wouldn't traditionally play on a guitar, like in your mind. But I remember when they first came out with all the hitting rock songs, it was like, okay, this is magical. So kudos to Harmonix. Like always been a good company in my mind in terms of their work on Rock Band. They've had a couple of other peripherals that have come out and haven't hit to the same extent as it does, but the team does good work. So 16 years, good on you.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's a crazy story.
The third story here it says Baldur's Gate 3 dev expresses concerns over subscription becoming the dominant distribution model. I think this is just like kind of a state of an industry type headline because everybody wants that subscription money, and there's been a lot of talk about it within games. It's gonna have to come to pass, you would imagine. Right now they're kind of being nice with like the battle pass type setup, but I would imagine if they continue to update games as long as they do, this subscription model is gonna have to be more part of the discussion than it ever has been.
Yeah, I mean, look, I am leery about discussing things that I don't know a ton about, but
Mhm.
from a consumer standpoint, the subscription model is going to be that is the new model. Number
Yeah.
one, there's a push away from people owning things when you have streaming services like Game Pass that sort of bridge the gap, and now Game Pass is starting to drop like triple A games onto their Game Pass, i.e. Starfield, who knows when the next Elder Scrolls comes out, if that's going to be loaded onto Game Pass. It's all going to be subscription model. Just simply, number one, from the way we consume games, we consume them and we move on. We
Mhm.
consume them, we move on, right? But not just from that perspective, but from the developer's perspective, right? They got to make money. And so the ways that you can make money if you're a developer are essentially you can work for a big time studio and then they have the infrastructure and money in place, but then you're bound by that studio's rules. Or you can develop your own game and you can do a Kickstarter where you can say, hey, we need this much money, and then we need this much money, and then we need this much money. Um, and hope that people will give you what you need for the next phase of the project, and that can be quite stressful. or you can go with a subscription based model if your game works for it, which is like, look, we're going to release a DLC every year for this. It's going to be 1 or 2 new levels, and you're going to pay whatever. We're going to release new characters all the time. You're going to pay your $9.99 per month if this is your main game. And I'm not a huge fan of it, to be real with you. I mean,
Right.
it is what it is. It is going to be the future. I, as an old gamer, I'm not a fan of it because I'm a huge advocate for game ownership, and I believe that you should own things so people can't take them from you. Um, and so I don't particularly like this ongoing, never-ending model. I believe in release your game, have it be done, and then put it out, and and then that's the end of the experience. But what I like and what I prefer doesn't really matter because most young people are willing to pay $9.99 a month because they can afford it, and that's fine, and that gives them access to the game. So it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it also is indicative of the time we live in, right? Like SaaS companies, software as a service companies are out there. Like we all pay $8 for Netflix if you choose, and if it's not Netflix, it's Hulu, it's something. Like you're using the subscription model in some way of life right now, I would imagine. I mean, you look at Microsoft and the way they've migrated to 360 and QuickBooks and all of these different softwares are all in the subscription model because incomes become predictable, right? And rather than getting that one hit of financing out of the gate when it delivers, like they're able to actually budget. And when you look at games like the one that comes to mind is, any ongoing game. So Fortnite, what's the shoot 'em up? Not Divinity, Destiny, that's a game model that's based on a subscription based model. If you bought it like 10 years ago and you're still playing it on your initial base purchase, you're not a preferred customer in Destiny's eyes, I would imagine. I think this can also be considered when you look at something like Cyberpunk 2077. Like that game came out 3 years ago and I played it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was better than people were giving it credit for, but it was still broken. Now I'm going back and playing it again and it's a far better experience. And the reason it's a far better experience is because they put in a lot of time, energy, and effort to make it a good experience. Now, obviously, it came out to a very negative, a very critical upheaval in terms of people like damning it almost and how bad it was. But because they put in that time, it's turned into something that is really cool. It still has the essence of what it was, but it's far better than it ever was. So excuse me, you look at something like that, and even if it was $70 out of the gate, you still almost need this subscription to carry it into what it is today. So it's an interesting area. It's not going to go anywhere. I am a big fan of physical because I can't hand like the game off to anybody at any time. I can't be like, hey, Phil, you really need to play like Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Like I can't just hand you that game because I bought it digitally. So it's an interesting
Yeah, I mean,
time.
well, it is interesting because, going back to your Destiny example, right? One of the big problems that one of the benefits of doing this subscription-based model is that when I played Destiny originally, to I wasn't willing to pay full price to buy the next expansion, to buy the next expansion. If they had said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to release a new expansion every 6 months, or we're going to release a new level every 6 months, and it's going to cost you $9.99. I think a lot of players, I mean, back then that would have been ahead of their time.
Right.
But if they had done that now, like, hey, this is going to be an ongoing experience that we're going to be adding and expanding to, I would have been more likely to stick with a game like Destiny as opposed to being like, I have to shell out $60 for the next expansion. I have to shell out, and then getting to the point where I've bought 9 expansions. On the flip side, something like I haven't played Cyberpunk,
Mhm.
but it does seem to me like Cyberpunk doesn't exactly fit with the model. But Cyberpunk brings up a great point in which there are a lot of games because of budgetary reasons that they're pushing out, even though they're broken or incomplete, right? I know that last year when we were on UP, we talked quite a bit about Pokemon being that way, where they released Pokemon and it was like a great game, but it was really broken. And then like they didn't have all these patches and they didn't have all these fixes. And I think part of that is because video games are infinitely more complex these days. And it's much harder to get all the bugs and kinks worked out. So I think the industry right now is in a big time of transition and figuring out what the future is going to be. Whether it's going to be a huge um, evolving, you work on this game and then you are constantly fixing it, or whether you work on experience. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 is always my favorite example. They didn't need a subscription-based model. They didn't need to they did not need to make you spend $9.99 a month. They sat in a room for 10 years, worked on this game, um, worked out every detail, and then released the game. And was like, here's a perfect piece of art. So it is possible to do it to create games without a subscription-based model. But it's just going to cost you a lot more. And a lot of these companies don't have that overhead to be able to do that.
And then that was going to be my pushback. A lot of the companies don't have the overhead to do that. Like you look at something like Rockstar, and they are like the pinnacle of game development in a lot of different ways and held very highly. Like you saw that GTA 6 trailer come out, and like the internet melted. Like the way that people were clicking on that and viewing that, they were super excited. And there's not a lot of devs out there that warrant that same kind of attention or like excitement within the gaming community. In fact, I was kind of thinking about Cyberpunk as this example that came to mind, and one thing that came to mind is remember how much the internet hated Cyberpunk 2077 when it came out? Remember how they were just like, "How dare you put this game on a pedestal? It's so broken. It looks like trash." And here we are 2 years later, and it was like, "No, you gotta play this game." It's funny how the
Well,
internet
it's so
changes
hard.
so
Yeah.
quickly, man. It's unreal.
The internet is that way. The internet, we even saying the word the internet, which is like the collective group of people, which are the mob. Um, Once they get riled up, and once like a decision has been made, once a decision has been made to like we don't like this, then
Mhm.
it's over. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be very. I mean, the same thing happened with Starfield, where people have piled on. I mean, you and I saw that firsthand with
Dude.
saying, "Hey, this isn't as terrible as you think it is." And people are like, "You're an absolute troll. You're a hater. You are in bed with the devs." Right? Like it's actually like it's not. It's kind of a fun game. Like it's still a little bit fun, and people are like, "No, it is 100% not fun." And if you don't agree with that, you're an idiot. And you're like, "Okay, I guess the internet has spoken, and we're going to like." The virtual mob has come with their pitchforks and torches, and they are ready to burn down any studio that releases a game with a glitch in it. And it's like, well, I have news for you. There's going to be a lot more games, and there's going to be a lot more glitches. So you better get used to the idea of games being a little bit broken and needing to evolve over time. I think the scary part of it, though, is like going back to the Grand Theft Auto trailer that you mentioned earlier. I know that there was a comment, and I don't want to misquote it, but essentially the um, the um, the CEO or whoever it is, and like I said, I'm butchering this story completely, made a comment about that we should be switching to a model that was play by the minute
Right.
and or play by the hour. And it was like that's a huge red flag, right? Because that's where this subscription model gets pushed into a place where you're 100% borrowing what they're giving you, right? And that's highly
Yeah.
concerning as somebody who's like has no leverage in the consumer. My only leverage is where I invest my time and energy. To have someone come out and treat like a game as a commodity, like you're gonna have to pay by the minute, is like that is the extreme version of the um subscription based model, and should be highly alarming to consumers that hey, that's even being talked about as an option.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
one of the most interesting pieces for me, and as somebody that plays a lot of Xbox over PlayStation, I remember how hard Xbox One got flamed for saying, "Hey, we're gonna sell games digitally, and you're not gonna be able to like switch there was basically a vibe that you wouldn't be able to hand off physical media." And then from there, like PlayStation basically goes, "This is how you share a game," and then hands it to the other person on stage. And you're going back 10 years ago, but everyone was so upset with that happening that you saw the PlayStation sales like jump, and all the Xbox sales just barely took off the ground. And from there, they've been like in this hole where they're trying to dig themselves out of. Fast forward to today, and now you see it happening naturally. Like games are being bought digitally more than they're being bought physically. Like there are times where I'm just like, well, there's no reason for me to go buy this because I can just get it digitally, and I don't even know if the store is going to carry it today. So like I'm victim of this as well, but I normally err on the side that you do, where it's like I'd rather have a physical piece of media to at least put in my console, even though it's going to need an update anyway. But hey, that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I mean, we're all selling our souls for convenience,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, that's really what it comes down to.
In
It's
so
like,
many
I'm
ways.
not gonna, I'm not gonna do this. I like take all the control as long as all the thinking has been taken out of it for me, right? Just tell me to show up and when to show up and hand me the controller and I'll play whatever's available. You know what I mean? And that sucks. And hey, look, I was a big Game Pass hater, and
Mhm.
now that I have Game Pass, I'm really into it. I think it has its place.
Mhm.
Um, but I still believe in the idea, right? Like, I believe that if you digitally buy a game, you should be able to download that game, right? We
Mhm.
recently saw, I don't know if you saw the post that I sent the other day, but essentially PlayStation, this was a prime example of these subscription models not working. I don't remember exactly what it was, so don't quote me
Yeah, this
100%, but
is this
quote
the
the idea.
discovery? Is this the discovery issue?
Yes, so
Yeah.
people had paid for subscription, and they had paid or they had paid for these to download these episodes, and they had paid by the episode. And so they had paid their 14.99 or whatever it was to own this. Like, I own this. Well, then guess what happens, right? Sony goes out and loses their contract with Discovery or whatever it is. They lose the media off their platform. And so now they're going and telling the end consumer, hey, I know you paid to own this digitally, but we no longer have the rights to it. So technically, you don't own it anymore. You're going to have to go rebuy it on another platform. So, really, technically, you never owned it. It felt like you owned it, but you really didn't. And like, that's the kind of stuff to me that is concerning with these subscription based models is like, you can own something physical that can't be taken from you, right?
Yeah.
Here's my disc, here's my game. It works. I can plug it in and play it whenever I want, online, offline. You really can't stop me from doing that. And so there's really an obscurity for our generation of just like, you don't own anything. We'll tell you what you can have. And when we're ready to take it away, we will. And like, nothing gets my blood boiling more than
Dude,
someone telling me what to do when they don't need to be.
no joke. No joke. No, I feel the exact same way. And it feels like one of those things where it's like it's coming and there's nothing we can do about it because we're old and everybody else is just like, yeah, I'm okay buying digitally. So I mean, here we are. Here we are. And it's a beautiful thing. So I feel like there's some good posts on Reddit this morning. If you want to go check them out, you can. There was one about like the best guards or police officers in a game. That was pretty interesting. Somebody come and said Skyrim. I have no recollection of the guards in Skyrim. Do you?
Um, Not really. I
Yeah,
mean,
me
I mean,
neither.
I remember the old like took an arrow to the knee, but that was I think that was actually
Yeah,
it wasn't Skyrim.
it wasn't.
That was the one before, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it says,
Which
oh,
was
Oblivion. Oblivion. Those
Oblivion.
Imperial
Yeah.
guards would track you down. See, I don't even remember that. I don't even remember
Yeah.
that. I
I remember that. Like, if you stole something from in town and you got caught in Oblivion, you would get they
Are
were
you
relentless.
serious? Were they
Yeah,
really?
they would mob you and chase you out of town and arrest you.
There's Metal Gear here. I couldn't
Metal
speak to
Gear's
Metal
good.
Gear,
Yeah.
yeah, in regard to guards. GTA 2. I remember those GTA games, the early ones, when you got 4 or 5 cops, things were just spicy enough to get you moving, but they didn't feel like you were disenfranchised when you were that high in all those stars. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, you just played. I mean, here's my throwback. There was a game for the old PlayStation. I think it was PS2 called Driver 2,
Oh yeah.
or Driver, and it was all police chases. I that actually got my blood pumping a little bit. But didn't you? I mean, what did you think the guards were like in Payday? Because I know that you've actually played that. So that
Dude,
is a game that you can actually speak to.
Payday's hard, man. So I would just basically go in there and get rolled every time that I was trying to play Payday. Like the cops would take me down super quickly, and that game's design is to kind of be like, oh yeah, take a whole bunch of friends and go in there and knock some stuff out. And they would just murk me every time. Like every time I tried to go in there and run solo, it, like wouldn't work out. So I think I had to be a better multiplayer person to like take on the guards. Also, I played like right when it came out, and I couldn't like knock a guard unconscious, which turned into some serious issues as well.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably a kudos to them, right? Because they actually developed a game with like a medium-sized barrier to entry,
Mhm.
which is kind of what you want. Like when you go in and you play a game, you're like, oh, this is so arcadey. I can just go in and mow people down. And and like they put a barrier to entry in there where you actually have to use tactics and skill and like actually figure out your way around it. So I guess kudos to them for that one.
Yeah, no joke, no joke. Do you need to step away at all? Are you good to go?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good to go.
cool. So let's hop into some games we have been playing because I like it. Like I said, I'm crashing your stream. You played Jusant on stream all the way through,
I did.
and you liked it quite a bit. I finally saw credits on it last night. It's about time, I know, but I did it. And what did you think of Jusant?
So I really liked it. I think it was good. I mean, it was a good refresher. I mean, we're coming off the back of Pentiment, so there was, Pentiment
And
had
anything is
no
good. Anything is good.
right. Like it was all reading. It was a visual novel. So we were coming off the back of Pentiment, and actually, give me 1 second. Give me like 30 seconds of dead air time.
No sweat, man. No sweat. Yeah. So I mean, Jusant. I'm gonna pull some up right now, but essentially, like Jusant is one of those games that I have just finished. I'm gonna pull up some clips for y'all on the back end too. Let me make sure it's muted as well. But essentially,
So
what's
yeah, we're coming off the back of Jusant. I mean, we're
yep.
coming off the back of Pentiment, which was all reading, and Jusant is a standard platformer where you essentially are climbing the entire game. It's got an interesting, it adds in an interesting dynamic to climbing because climbing is typically not is one of my least favorite mechanics in games in general. So they kind of add some realism to it by adding these little pips that you can put on the wall and adding these different like using the rope is very very different from regular climbing. So I thought that was kind of cool. The game scales where hey, you have a skill, you have to use that skill, you get a couple other skills, and then you solve these more complex puzzles as time goes on with your various skills to get through the game. Each level is a different biome of each level is a different biome of rock surface, whether it's rocks or snow or trees or whatever it is. So it scales nicely. There's no dialogue in it at all. So I've played 2 games in a row with absolutely no dialogue. So now moving on to the game I'm playing now, I'm very happy to be playing that. Um,
So I do have to say like that is my biggest like miss I feel like for this game is that it's not voice acted. So like this is from Don't Nod Studios, and if you don't if you know Don't Nod, you know they're known for their Life is Strange series. And the character development in the Life is Strange is really really high. Like you're having all of these dialogues back and forth, the characters are well built out, you get the emotional swells throughout the course of the games. And I feel like this like really tried to hit it, but it would have been so much better with voice acting for me.
yeah.
Coming off of Pentiment, we both played that, a lot of reading. I found myself forcing myself into reading some of these journals just to see like what it was about. And a lot of the text that they throw into this game really has to do with that kind of character development that Don't Nod's known for. So it feels like they're really built out. Like I read one of the letters that was kind of near the end of the game, and it essentially is this person writing a letter to their significant other, and they know that they kind of contributed to the downfall of the big drought that you're with in Jasant. They're like, I don't get to. Would I have rather saved our community or known you through this process? And the truth is, I don't know that I could have lived without you. So it still like taps into these really emotional beats if you choose to dive into them. I know you didn't really look into the readings all that much. I think that this game is great. I'm kind of surprised it's missing some of those fixtures that we saw in other Don't Nod games, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so I never played any other Don't Nod games, but what I will say to you is that this is 100% accurate. The I did not read a single letter, and I didn't read a single letter because the vibe does not go with what you're doing,
Right.
right? So there's so many wins with this game where Jasant has so many wins, right? The music is amazing. The music is the number one, I would say, the big shout out to them. It adds to the ambiance, the payoffs at the end of each level with these big, intense, like emotional scenes with things going on, like great. And like the climbing, you're moving pretty quickly through it. And another nod to them is like this is a true 5 to 6 hour time to beat. So, right, like sometimes we joke about that. I joked about that a couple weeks ago where I said add 5 hours to whatever it is. This one is a true 5 to 6 hour time to beat. But their biggest miss was the fact that they had these journal entries as opposed to like doing in some clever voices, or like doing in some clever text on the screen. Doing it just, when you're playing a game, the pacing has to be the same throughout. And if you're climbing and you're looking for the next ledge, and then you have to stop and you have to read, like you have to spend 5 minutes reading something, there would be a game. Actually, let's be real. I don't know if there really is a game that I would actually sit and read text, like read letters, like if I'm going to read, I'm going to read a book. I have lots of books. I enjoy reading. I'm playing video games because I don't want to read. I would rather enjoy the visual and audio medium of a game. That's what makes a game a game, and I would rather enjoy it that way. So I think that the writing in this was a big miss for them, but everything else was a big thumbs up.
Yeah, and I think back to this game because we talked about it yesterday when we were grabbing some coffee over the workday, and you're like, "So, you're not doing Jusant yet?" I'm like, "I'm not," and you're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It just kind of feels like a chore. I'm not crazy about the game." And then yesterday I had a really good like 90-minute session, and what I will say is this game finishes really strong. But what I realized during that 90-minute session last night is that the reason that I kept stopping this game is I would have this game on in the living room, play for like 20 minutes, hit like one of those letters and be like, "Oh, well, I got to read this, but I can't really read it now because my family's here, so I'm going to like come back and like read this later." You know what I mean? So it was like this balance where I kept like stopping myself because the reading came up, which probably isn't a fair criticism, right? I mean, as an experience on its own, I'm sure it's fine. But what I will say is like it did like start and stop the experience a little bit for me. So in closing, like three things that I would bring up for Jusant. It's a Don't Nod game. It's very well done, and I'm really excited to see what Don't Nod does next because they've broken their Life is Strange like tradition and gone outside of the box. And this game is getting a lot of critical acclaim, and it's going to cause them to go out and build more either in this vein or it's going to allow them to experiment a little more, which excites me. You mentioned it earlier. The climbing is fabulous. It doesn't feel like tap A and move forward. It doesn't feel like hold up. Like it feels innovative and pretty neat in terms of the game. And lastly, as you mentioned, it's a shorter experience. 6 chapters, 5 to 6 hours. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I think the climbing gets a little samey, like in Act 2. Like that second, third chapter for me didn't really jump off the page. But by the end of the game, in the last 2 chapters, it really finishes strong. So I would suggest Jusant. I ended on it pretty highly. I know this sits at like your favorite game of the year right now, but it's also just January.
Yeah, I mean, so I talked with you about this yesterday. On my end of things, I am running a live list. So I always like to do new things, and I always like to reinvent things and kind of put my spin or my take on things. So one of the things I'm working on my side of things is that I am having my game of the year list. That is going to be a live running document as the year goes on and as I complete games. And so I'm treating it like a Reddit post. And so in Reddit, right, things are on the top of our brain. And then as we get new things, that thing moves down the list a little bit. So I've only beat 2 games this year. I mean, we are in January. It's been 2 weeks and I have beat 2 games. So there is that. I beat Pentiment and I beat Jusant. Jusant's definitely number one right now for me, for sure, out of the two, just simply because Pentiment was not designed for me. It was not designed for me. And in closing on Jusant, look, there's so many kudos to them for designing something original,
Mhm.
right? And that's the big thing, right? Like designing something with personality, with emotion, with a unique character, unique art design, adding your spin onto the climbing thing. I've always hated climbing in video games. So for you to take a game and just make it solely about climbing, so much was thought out in this game, from the music to making it not too long to the different environments. Just get rid of the reading and make it more like a few lines of audio where you're gonna have to pay the writer anyways. You're gonna have to pay someone to write that anyways. Just pay someone to come in and do a few voice lines like keep climbing or something where it's like encouraging them to go on, where you could say it in a couple sentences and have some cool cursive script go across the screen, and you'd be like, I'm not becoming disconnected from this experience. Because, right, the whole point, especially with single player games, is immersion. I'm not as worried about being immersive when I play Fortnite,
Mhm.
right? When I'm playing Fortnite, I'm hanging out with my friends. I know what to expect. I can actually click out of the game a little bit and chat with my buddies, and we can shoot some stuff, and like I know what I'm doing, right? But in a single player game that you're going to tell a specific narrative, I will always come back to this. You want all the mechanics to reinforce the end experience. So you want the climbing to reinforce the end experience. You want the dialogue to reinforce the end experience. And if you're doing something that is, and if the end experience is, I want someone to be immersed in this narrative, and you're doing things to constantly take them out of that, right? Like, I'm not going to do a side quest in Jusant because the climbing is so tedious using left and right, left and right, left and right, as opposed to just the typical A. My one criticism of the climbing is that the double jump I did not feel with A was not as sticky as I would have liked it to be. I really struggled with that. That could have been my own personal issue as opposed to the game itself. But I felt that of all the mechanics that were not that good, the double jump, I could not always, because I think you actually had to double jump and grab. So I think that that was a little bit tedious to do that, but that's okay. I adapted to it as time went on, and it didn't wreck the experience for me. The only thing that pulled me out of the experience was the reading. And after I saw this is how the story was going to be told, I was like, yeah, I'm just not going to know what's going to happen. Right. Like, I was like, I'm just going to climb because I want to stay immersed in the experience. So I was able to um, skip all that, but I missed whatever all those writers put that work in. And it's like, I didn't read a single page. I didn't
Yeah,
read a single thing that they wrote.
and like spoiler alert for Jusant, like a 5 hour game, but they do kind of tell a cool narrative, right? So essentially, it's a society that can't understand why the water is going away and it's not raining, right? And then they have these sky whales that they call ballasts, and then they're like, oh well, I mean, well the ballasts have the water, we have to hunt them. So then it becomes like some mystical ability for them to get water, and then they actually start hunting these big sky whales, and then from that comes the downfall of the entire society, and that's essentially what you're doing this entire game is going through and like seeing this broken society over time. So I think like it's a good narrative. I think it's like kind of hidden in the text, but it's at the end of the day, it's a good experience in my opinion. Speaking of being hidden in the text, any final thoughts on Pentiment? Last time we talked, we were close to the end. We were kind of in the middle of Act 3 or the beginning of Act 3, and it felt like a slog. And then we both played a little bit more. We both seen credits on Pentiment, and I think we both kind of sit in the same zone on it. I mean, what are any final thoughts that you want to propose or discuss for Pentiment?
Yeah, I would say it's not a game. So that would be my final thought, right? It's not a game, and you can call it an experience,
Mhm.
but it's not a game because the definition of a game is that you can fail at a game. That's the whole point. So it's not a game. It's more of a visual novel. It's just not built for me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like you can be. I understand people want to love it because of the art piece nature and the history and trying to push it in a different direction. But for me, it wasn't built for me. That game was not made for me. The fact that people are giving it 10 out of 10s is mind blowing because, if you're reading a novel, right? If you're going to sit down, you're going to read a book, right? You're on a set course. You're like, I'm reading this story, then this thing happens to this character, then this thing happens to this character. There are so many character dialogue trees that did not matter to me that ended, like the story ended and you're like, this person lived and this person married to this person did this, and I'm like, I am spamming through this so fast to get to the end that I don't care what happens to some of these people. So like I said, I don't think it's a game. I think it's a visual experience. It wasn't designed for me. I'm glad I played it. Won't be doing a visual novel again for a long time because my poor brain needs a bit more dopamine than that, and it just wasn't enough, right?
Yeah,
It just wasn't enough for
I
me.
would agree. I would agree. Like you essentially said that this is not a game, and I would agree with that. What I will say is this game is probably a masterpiece. Like the writing in it, the way it all interconnects, I think is very highly executed and is impressive to say the least. Like going through and spending the time, am I glad I did it? Yes. Was it too long? Yes. I think they could have really ripped out a lot of the fluff there and like the center, and you still would have hit to the same way it did. I kind of wanted to bring this up to call it a spoiler cast. I don't think we need to spoil it, but what I will say, the twists and turns at the end of this game like really paid off for me. The way they tied in like this narrative of 3 generations of people and then had you play different characters throughout those generations, and then there was one kind of overarching individual or group of people that were like puppet mastering all of the killings and happenings throughout the entirety of the story was really, really impressive. One thing that I wasn't crazy about is that there was no way to actually win in those early acts. Like, you never would have chosen the right person in terms of accusing the murderer. They put you in a situation where, one, you never have enough information, and two, there's no way you can ever choose the right person. So you get into this situation where you're constantly failing all the way through the title, which also didn't make me enjoy my experience on the way through. It's just like, okay, well, if I'm not going to get it right, like I never do, and I can't pass any of these skill tests, then why am I even trying? You know what I mean? Like, it almost started some disenfranchisement with the player, in my opinion, and it really made it feel like a lot longer than it was. And for a 15-hour, no action, all reading based title, that's a lot to ask for players, especially in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you nailed it right on the head. It's like, if you want to just watch a movie, let me just watch a movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're just going to tell a story that says, hey, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, that's fine. Then just have it be a film. But to sit down and go like, you're gonna play this, like the most interesting piece of Pentiment was the main character, and the scenes that I ended up liking the most within that game were the scenes where he's trapped in his own mind, and you're doing that maze and you're trying to find your way through. Like, I felt that was extremely relatable. Um, but beyond that, like, and the ending was quite surprising. I was like, I hadn't considered that these characters were going to be involved, or I hadn't considered that this was going to happen. Um, and but all in all, it's like, you can't win, you can't lose. So you're just on the experience, but then you have to go do all these things to get to the end. So the winning is getting the big thing at the end, but you're kind of being forced to make these choices, and there is no way to get the correct person in the first 2 acts.
Right.
You can't nail them correctly. And for me, that is that's a big L for me, because
Yeah.
that's part of playing the game. Like, a game is you develop, you learn some skills, you use those skills, you prove that you can use those skills, and then you move on. Right? I feel like people are overly romantic about this game. I
I
think
would
they're
agree.
overly romantic about it, and they go like, "This is going to be the future of games," and look at this, they're pushing the envelope. It's not. This is not. No, it's not. It's not like this is. It's cool. It's interesting. It's like when if you're not that into art and you go to an art museum and you're like, "That was kind of cool," and you're like, "That," but I'm probably not going to go back to the art museum for a while. Like, if that's not your thing, right? Or if you go to a concert and it's not your favorite band, you're like, that's kind of cool. Like, cool, I did that, right? I felt the same.
Right.
So, like I said, all in all, this wasn't designed for me. I don't think it's a game, but it may be for you. If you like reading and you like the Reformation time period and you like history set pieces and you like reading and you don't like any audio and you don't like any combat, might be your jam.
Might be your jam. Might be your jam. It was definitely a slog for us. At least it was
Yeah,
for
it was
me.
definitely a slog for
I was
us.
like, please let this end. Please let this end. And when it finally did, I was like, okay, I get why everybody likes it. But still, like, really? Like perfect game on IGN? Like, I don't know about that. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
would. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, come on, man.
Come
Like, what are we
on.
really like? What are we really talking about? And like, look, it's like I said, it may not be for me, but like, there are some clear, obvious flaws with this game,
Clearly, yeah.
which is like, it needs. You can't win. You can't get a better ending or worse ending. Really, you can be evil if you want and kind of have probably an evil ending, but there are dialogue trees that do not matter at all, that
None.
span minutes,
Yeah.
that have played no
No
they
payoff.
do not play into the end game, because the end game, I mean, here's the one spoiler you'll get: the end game is going to play out the way the end game plays out no matter what you do.
Hmm.
So no matter what ending you get, the ending is going to play out the way it plays out, so you should just get used to that. Hashtag Mass Effect. And that's the way it is. And so like
Dude,
they
even
that could have
even
done with
watching
some.
this gameplay makes me feel like, oh man, I read a lot of dialogue that had no bearing, like no bearing on the overall
You go
story.
and you talk to this person and they're like, I'm poor and broke. And then you go and you walk and you talk to this person, they're like, I'm poor and broke. Would you like some bread? And then you're like, dude, I've been doing this for 3 hours. And so like to see that this needed some editing, it like is the least, right? They
Right.
needed more cutscenes. They needed to break up the dialogue and have more of these unique moments happen. Where there's some cool spin-off areas where you're like, oh hey, I'm at least not talking to people. I'm in a new area of the map that I haven't seen before. Yeah, that was cool. But this is yeah,
Or like
to wrap it up, I
when
know
you
that we
got to hunt the deer, you're like, this is great. Let's do more of this. And
well
like
see
really all
that's
you're
the
doing
interesting
is
thing.
yeah.
That's the interesting thing is I never did that in my game.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
so you and I had very different experiences. You clearly went with the guy at the
Interesting.
mill and went on the hunt with him,
I did,
and
yeah.
I did not. I
Oh
did
man.
not.
No, I was just like,
So I did
sure.
other
I
things.
thought he was gonna kill me in the woods. That's how I thought it was gonna end. And I'm like, maybe if we can just expedite this process and let you kill me, like we could just be done with this game. Like, give me credits, please.
Yeah, yeah. So I did not do that. So there were clearly that. I mean, that is a benefit of this game is that there we had very different experiences
And we'll never know
based
what
on
those
our
other paths are because I'm never gonna go replay this game.
correct, correct. And that's the thing is that it's just too much. So all
For
in all, I
sure.
mean, you know how I feel. It's going to probably be towards the bottom of my list
Right.
at the end of the year, simply because it wasn't designed for me. And I would say it wasn't designed for most gamers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I really would because it's one of those titles that's going to be very divisive, is how I would say it, is because some people are going to love this and other people are going to be like, no, not so much. And I'm kind of on the no, not so much. I think I told you, like, this is one of those games that I definitely put off and didn't want to play, like, because I came off of Norco and I'm like, well, I don't really want to do that again. And this is like very similar Norco vibes. So. Good stuff. Good stuff. I want to just gush about a game real quick. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
It Takes Two is one of the greatest games I have ever played. Greatest games I have ever played. When I have tried to play this game like 4 or 5 times in terms of like getting individuals to come in it with me. You and I tried to play it on stream once. My sister and I tried to play it on stream once. And now that my kids are at the age where they're like 7 or 8 and like starting to put together how to use a controller, I've been playing this with them, and it has been like magical experience after magical experience over and over. And I can't get enough of it. Like the split screen is back in this game and feels like old school split screen experiences. And when this game came out initially and everybody was like, this is game of the year, I'm like, psh, whatever. Like, I've tried this 4 times. There's no way this game is as good as it is. And now that I'm playing it in the right setting with my kiddo who's just like starting to learn a platformer and starting to be able to platform, one, I'm watching her like transition through this game and grow immensely with every level. And two, the way that they're balancing the puzzles and the action and then the cutscenes is masterful. Like, I am very impressed with the gameplay and how it all fits together in this game, and I now understand why this game is held so highly. It Takes Two is one of the coolest experiences I have had in years, and probably a lot of that is attributed to me playing with my daughter, but at the same time, this has re-energized my appreciation for a split screen experience, and I don't think it'll parallel in any comparison out there on any games on the market.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? This It Takes Two is a split screen game.
Hmm.
And it's a split screen game and it's a split screen
It
game. And
is.
so what that means is that for me, we've fallen off of this.
Right.
And so you have to sit down and play this game and continue to play it and finish it. Because if you don't have your partner there to play it, you're gonna fall off and forget everything that's going on. And that has happened several times to you, and it's
Mhm.
already happened with me where the levels are uniquely designed. They really do a great job at making the level design and game mechanics reinforce the idea of It Takes Two, where each person has a skill that's equally useful, and you have to get through the levels with both people.
Mhm.
Each level is completely unique. The boss battles are unique, and my biggest praise, honestly, is from a darker storytelling perspective. The game really focuses around divorce,
Right.
which is a subject that is not covered as much in kids games. but yet is so prevalent in our society. Most games and most films that kids get to see are focused around a death in the family. You know, you think about The Lion King, you think about Bambi, you think about I don't know, there's a whole bunch of other ones where the mom dies or the dad dies, right? Like
Sure.
Tarzan, right?
Yeah.
Tarzan, right? The parents die, right? There's so many films, and that's an important thing, right? Because that happens, and like that's very difficult for kids to process. So this game is sort of focused around something that's actually much more common in our society, which is like adults have a really difficult time working together, especially sometimes adults that live together. So for me, I think that that's great for them to kind of tackle that. I feel like so far what I've seen, what I've played, about 4 or 5 hours in, they've handled it tastefully where they're showing the challenges of two people having to work through really difficult things. In this case, the really difficult thing is puzzles and the puzzles within the game to kind of get back to their daughter. And I think that that's an important concept. I think it should be. I always like when games try to touch at a little bit of what's true, universally true, and what's real and what people are going through. So for them to kind of make a game like this, I think is just, even the attempt to make the game is noble, and they handled it in a tasteful way. Um,
They did,
and yeah,
and I
but
think like when I started playing with my daughter, I was worried that like, okay, this content may be too, too intense for her. And I think essentially what I found through playing the game is that they do it subtly enough to where a kid doesn't necessarily understand exactly what's going on. Like, I'm sure if you're really watching all the cutscenes and playing it all the way through, that would be one thing. I kind of started this later with my daughter, and she's not like feeling that it's too much. She's not, it doesn't feel like it's scaring her or it's heavy. So I think they've done it in a healthy way, in a tasteful way, where it's not like beating you over the head, but it's just subtle enough to be like, okay, this is the story they're telling. So I'm really impressed with this game. Like I said, I was a hater in the beginning. I kept saying like, why? And now I have both my kids, a 5 and a 7-year old, that are like fighting over the controller. And it's one of those things where like my 7-year old and I want to play and we're making good progress. And the 5-year old's like, well, I want to be a part of it. So the 5-year old comes in, struggles a little bit, plays through some. I'll pick up the controller, take it from her, get them through a few levels. And now they're like playing a lot of it on their own, which I'm like, I want to play the game. But, it's like one of those transitions where it's like, this is a cool experience that I will not have with another title. Like, no one else is going for the split screen market like It Takes Two. And it's pretty impressive the length and the attention to detail that is incorporated in this, because it doesn't feel like there's a huge market for it, right? Split screen gaming is not something that we see like as a top selling feature of games, and they've really gone all the way in, and it's the best in the business in terms of this experience.
yeah, I mean, I think I feel the same about split screen games as I do about disc ownership. It's a nostalgic view. It
Hmm.
is something that I think I wish there was more of, but I also kind of don't, because I'm not really gonna do it. You know what I mean, right? Like
Right.
I don't have people that live near me. I don't live in a community, and as an adult who's working all the time, it's hard to even get your schedule synced up every single day to play this game.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, the split screen element would be more with your kids, right?
I
And
think it has to be
not
because
with your
like who is
peers.
this game for? Like you and I tried to play it, and like no offense, but like I'm not really trying to play like a platformer game about divorce with me and my buddy online. You know what I mean? Like maybe my
Yeah,
wife, maybe my kid, we tried it with my
yeah,
sister, like that would have worked had we been able to maintain the schedule. But back to your point, I couldn't maintain a schedule with any of those people. And the only reason it's
yeah.
working is because I have the kids in the couch and they request it. So again, like I don't know exactly who this game is for in terms of like the product market fit, but what I will say is like this is a very, very well done game. Will probably sit on my top 10 list for 2024 just because I haven't experienced anything like it. So mad props to It Takes Two. It's a very specific use case, but I'm enjoying it greatly.
Yeah, I mean, I when I started playing it, I remember going like there were several moments when I was playing this where I'm like, this is completely unique. This is
Hmm.
completely fun. And like we like that, right? We like that. When you play a game, right? If you play a shooter, I was thinking this the other night, right? When you play a shooter, all shooters are the same, right? You get a gun, you go to a room, you clear out the bad guys, you go travel in some way, whether it's climbing, jumping to the next area, you clear out a room, you get a better gun, you fight a boss, on and on and on, and you go until you get to the end. Platformers are the same. You get some tools, you figure out how to use those tools, you move on to an area, you show that you can use those tools, you move on. So the way that you like those are the base models, right, of how to do a platform or how to do a shooter. So if you're going to have that type of model, you're going to need to find a more unique way to get people to use those tools. And I think It Takes Two does that in the platforming realm, right? Like you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to. I have these tools. I'm using the base model. I'm not really getting bored because there's all these unique ways that I can use them to get on to the next area, right? Like the other way that you could get people through it is like you added more cutscenes, or you take kind of like a Call of Duty approach where big set pieces are happening all the time to keep people locked into the fact that they're doing these repetitive tasks. And It Takes Two does all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
big props to them. I It's going to be one of those things where my son, he's hot and cold with video games,
mhm.
right? Which is cool. And he's hot and cold with video games. So for me, it's like I don't know the target market would be anybody but me and my son. And so I'll kind of have to wait for him to put this one to bed.
Yeah, for sure. And I would highly recommend it. One thing that I think is really cool here is that each level they give you like different abilities for each character. So like right when you feel like you got a good cadence of the abilities, like they switch it up and give you something brand new. And they kind of adopt the Mario model where like they teach you how to use it very in a very elementary way and then scale it up. And by the end of the level, you're like putting together combos or like using the tools that they've given you in a more integral fashion on the different happenings in the level. So I think it's pretty a pretty cool game. I would recommend it. The last thing that I will say about it is I don't know if you'll see a lot of games like this in the future. Like I just don't think there's a product market fit here, even with all the fanfare of like this is the greatest game of 2022 or whatever year it was. Like I just don't know if it hangs, but
I mean,
highly
yeah,
recommend.
I agree. I agree
Yeah.
100%. Like this is probably a moment in time for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, man, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So those are the three games we've been playing. What time is it? It is 7:15. What's
Well,
your morning look like?
why don't we spend the next half hour, because I have a hard stop at 7:45. So let's spend the next half an hour. Why don't we do our first look and we talk about what are you going to move on to next? What's the next game that you're going to play? And then I can kind of talk about what I've been playing on stream. Um, and we can give our first. I'll give my first look, and you give what are you thinking that is going to be the next game on your list that you're going to tackle here in January.
It's gonna be Cyberpunk 2077. For sure. Like Cyberpunk 2077 is one of those games that I really was starting to get into on let's see, it would have been about this time last year when we knew that Jedi Survivor and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom were coming out. At that time, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get into this, and I got into a really good rhythm with Cyberpunk, and I felt like, okay, this could actually be a game that I really dive into. Then Tears of the Kingdom hit, then of course Jedi Survivor hit, and within those two happenings, I basically buried this game and didn't come back to it. You know, you also had the added complexity with the fact that this is a game that people were super excited about this time last year. It was like, oh my gosh, they fixed it. It's so much better. It's so much greater. So like I also parked it for that reason. Cyberpunk 2077 will be the next title that I take on, and I'm excited to get in there.
So, I mean, I know that they've continued to update it and fix it. I mean, I guess my question for you is, because I probably won't play it, or if I do play it, it will be later on in the year. Um, is it? I assume it's just a main campaign, right? Or is it a living, breathing entity for which you have to constantly explore new DLCs and new things, or is it just like a main story that you need to resolve?
Good question. So I don't really know how Phantom Liberty works in, which is like the new expansion. I probably need to look that up. My goal was to kind of get my legs under me in terms of the build and how the character movement works, and I feel like I'm there. I kind of played. I woke up really early and was excited to play, or was excited to have this conversation. So I actually played a little bit of it this morning, and I feel like I'm ready to start looking at that. My goal will be to play Phantom Livery, which is the expansion DLC that everybody was raving about, but it also feels like the reason people were able to talk about it this last year, if that makes sense. Like, had they not come out with an DLC, I don't know that it would have been as well received on all the GOTY lists. But now they're using it as like, oh, well, the DLC is what's propping it up. It's like, no, you just rebuilt the entire game. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on is getting through the main story. I believe I'm about 60 to 70% through the main story, and then I also want to do the DLC. So it probably shouldn't take me that long to finish, but my goal is to like knock some of these titles off my backlog. So It Takes Two, I'm on the final level with my kids. Should be done with that. They've been playing Goat Simulator. I'm not going to try to finish that, but that's going to be an ongoing game with the kiddos. And then Cyberpunk 2077. So of those three, It Takes Two and Cyberpunk 2077 on the top of my list to knock off the backlog very soon.
Great. Yeah. I mean, so for me, right, I know that yeah, I have my ongoing list as well.
Mhm.
Right now I am 4.5 hours into High on Life. And first thoughts on that game are that I'm enjoying it. I mean, like I said, I kind of reintroduced myself to the gaming world via Pentiment, then Jusant, and then High on Life. So I went from only reading to climbing and reading to actually shooting stuff again, which I enjoy, and it's fun. I mean, it's a go in, clear out the bad guys, go in, clear out the bad guys, get a new gun, go in, clear out the bad guys, fight a boss, get a new gun, on and on you go through the typical model until you get to the end. The dialogue in that, obviously, this is a M for mature, it's adults only type game. The dialogue does get a little bit grating sometimes because the shtick sort of wears off
Mm.
after a little while. But it's fun, and some of the dialogue is really self-aware. So there was a sequence yesterday when I was playing where I was literally at work filling out paperwork and then signing paperwork and then filing it away and signing paperwork and filing it away. So they are definitely self-aware, and there are some seriously funny moments. So I'm looking forward to beating that.
So, are
Down
you a fan of Rick and Morty?
So I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think I've ever watched like a full season. I've seen bits and pieces of episodes, but I've never dove into the lore of Rick and Morty.
Gotcha.
So like that's why I don't have any context on it, because it's like I don't know all that history.
hmm So I really appreciated Rick and Morty for like the first couple of seasons, and then like I just kind of fell off of it. I'm not normally a guy that plays a lot of animated stuff, but the humor that they were throwing out at that time when that show started coming out, I was like really impressed with. I was like, okay, I'm not a South Park person. I'm not like a American Dad or Family Guy individual for the most part, but this really hit me in the sweet spot with the humor. And what I've seen of this game seems to play right in that same fold, and I'm like really excited to play this game. It almost feels like popcorn or candy. Like I know it's going to be like a good experience. I just haven't dove in yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, right? So there's a lot of different enemy types. There's different combat. They've done it in a clever, interesting way. They've made it into sort of this crass, like the opening sequence of the game is like your sister's doing drugs, and then you have to pick your character from from her mirror that she's doing drugs off of. That's how you pick the face of your character, and you're like, this is definitely for adults only. And so
That's
I
good
was
to
like,
know.
wow, that's what this is. This is not something that we play in front of the kids
Oh,
at
that's
all.
a
This
little disappointing. I was thinking because the colors are so vibrant in this game. I'm like, oh, the girls would love this game. And now I'm hearing that,
well
I'm like, well,
yeah,
maybe not.
this is a 100% play after they go to bed. There is a 0% chance that you're going to get away with playing this game in front of them. Um, Beyond that, so it's fun. It's
Mhm.
very fun. The level design's cool. The commentary is good. I mean, like I said, for me, it can get a little bit grating because you have a shtick and you're like, oh, this is kind of funny, and then you're like, oh, okay, like I get it. You're like being crass to be crass, right? Just on purpose. So it's fun. It's a. I've been really enjoying a shooter game again. I've been enjoying that base model. I've finished with two bosses. I'm going into the third one, so the entire game revolves around essentially hunting these bosses, and then each boss lives in a different world, and you go or a different realm, and then you go in, you travel in, you get through all the bads, and then you fight them. And then as you kill them, they unlock a new gun that you can then add to your repertoire that do unique things. So all in all, it's cool. On my list of games, I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing: because I'm going to be gone um, for about 10 days in February, I may wait to start Lies of P, because Lies of P is high on my list right now. That's a 30-hour time to beat. That's a pretty heavy game to play. It's also Dark Soulsian, which I've never been good at.
Right.
So for me, I may push that game back until I get back,
Mhm.
because that's going to be about 15 streams to get that one complete. So I may start something else, something smaller.
And it's a Dark
Um,
Souls game. So my experience with Dark Souls games is like it says it's 10 hours and I'm like, but I'm bad at those games, so make it 15. So you may even be higher than that, man, I gotta say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've never been able to get beyond like a level or two in a
Yeah.
Dark Soulsian game. So for me, that may be one that I have to park. You know what I mean? I
Right.
might have to park that one and try something different. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. It's high on my list, right? We wanted to get some difficult games down this year. There's a lot of games on Game Pass. We've been looking at Roller Drome. I have a whole list of smaller games that might make the cut. We'll see what I can get done before I leave in February.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'm building the list of 2023, and I'm close. I was working on it all yesterday actually, so it's starting to come together. I am only waiting for one more submission from one of the sites that I'm tracking. I have 22 different sites or gaming journalists that have submitted their Game of the Years 2023. I'm going to build a spreadsheet and figure out which one occurred the most across all lists. And it's a pretty interesting exercise. You know, I would say that like there are a couple of front runners from 2023. Baldur's Gate, Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man 2, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Super Mario Wonder are all kind of in that top tier. Like in terms of like the top 5 games of 2023, those are all ones that pop. Lies of P got a lot of love too, so I'm glad that that one is one that we're talking about. Jusant got a lot of love as well. So we're going to try to play the best games that are available. Phil and I both have Game Pass, so we're going to continue to play games off that list, and hopefully we're able to tell you what's worth your time and what it's not. Pentiment might not be worth your time. Jusant probably is.
Yeah, there's a lot of games on that list that I'm on the fence about, right? Because
Hmm.
Baldur's Gate 3, hey, look, I'm not really that into D&D, but at the same time, right, the reviews that I've seen from that from different streamers and different personalities is like this is a generation defining game, so that's annoying because I'm not typically into D&D and now I might have to play it. And I know a lot of people really love that. Spider-Man 2, I really was not super feeling. I don't know. I'm not a big Spider-Man guy. I'm going to be real with you. I am not. I typically do not like the. I know HG would be disappointed because that's his favorite character of all time, but I am also just really not into that beat 'em up genre.
Mm.
That sort of. I did play back in the day. Did play Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. I'm just not jump down. I'm just not that into that. I really find that to be monotonous. So I know that that's what it was in the first one, and it looks like it's kind of more of the same in the second one. That's what it's going to be. So that might be
Yeah, Dr. Z is
uh,
playing that right now, so he might be able to give you a little bit more insight on it than I, but it looks pretty good. Looks kind of scary. It seems like the storytelling's really well done. I'm definitely gonna play that. I was a huge fan of Control. I don't know if you played Control, but that game was really fun in my opinion as well. So I'm here for whatever Remedy's gonna do moving forward because the last couple of entries that they've put out have been really good. And I've always loved Max Payne. So even back in the day, I was a Remedy fan, but now it feels like a can't miss title in my opinion.
well, there you have it. I mean, we'll see what the year brings. I know that Elden Ring is high on my list this year, so
Oh, dude,
we may
you're just looking for pain, man. Liza
we might.
P and
Well, and
Elden
I'll
Ring.
in the multiplayer circuit, this year is going to be a big year
Hmm.
because in theory, summer 2024, Stormgate is coming out. So for me, that might be a game changer for me. Simply because that game is being developed by, what my favorite video game of all time, or, definitely top five, probably game I put most amount of time in. All of the people who made StarCraft 2 left, started their own studio. It is going to be they are using the free to play model. It is going to have a, PvP element. They are also going to have a, player versus AI. So it will be co-op as well. And I'm just, that beta is the week of February 5th through the 12th, but I don't think that I'm going to be in on that. I don't think that I'm going to be playing that. I think I'm just going to wait for it to fully come out. I love a good competitive real-time strategy game, and I haven't played one in a while. I haven't really touched StarCraft since working on this project. We'll see. That might throw a wrench in what my plans are for the year as far as like knocking off a lot of these titles. But that's an exciting time. I mean, I'm hesitant to get excited because I was so pumped for Diablo 4, and I was so let down for myself that I had grown that it may not hit the same for me.
Yeah. So one of the lists that I did source yesterday was Kind of Funny Games, which is like a pretty big YouTube outlet. And one of the guys went off about how great Diablo 4 was. And through like what he said, I was like, okay, I appreciate this game more than I thought I did. Like he's saying some pretty good stuff. But yeah, that was a little bit of a letdown for me personally, but I've never been a huge Diablo guy. What I will say is like what we did last year in 2023 is we tried to do as many as we could off of this backlog list, but we also put a mix of like new titles in. And I imagine that's going to be the same way we move forward this year. Like if there are games that seem shiny and like worth our time or worth investigating or streaming, I think we dive in. Alternatively, we can look at these backlog games. We're on Game Pass, so we're going to be sourcing a lot from that space as well. But ultimately, we're going to be playing games. We're going to be talking about games. And I
Yeah.
totally crashed your stream this morning, and I really appreciate you changing everything to allow me to be part of it.
No, this may become a regular thing where we kind of do our weekly check-in. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how both you and I are feeling, and yeah, it's good to break it up. Playing single-player games on stream is hard.
Yeah,
Simply streaming in general is hard, especially when you're streaming to no one. But streaming single-player games is especially hard because there's not a lot of times, especially if you can't figure out a puzzle or you don't know what's going on, you're kind of creating an experience that's not as optimal for the end user. You can't always create these sweet plays or these funny moments because you're not engaging with strangers. You're not doing some sweet shots or right. You're just playing through a narrative. And so for me, like tackling a lot of these single player games, like it's good to break that up.
yeah.
It's good to break it up and do different fun things.
Dude, I had the exact experience yesterday. So I'm playing Jusant, I'm at that last level, and I could not figure out how to climb that stupid obelisk. I walked around that tower like 14 times trying to figure out that you need to step up on one platform. And I was just like, this is stupid. This is absolutely ridiculous. I just burned 10 minutes for nothing. Like, this is
Well,
ridiculous.
and that's the thing that takes you out of an experience, right? It's like when you're playing it and you're like, the music's going and you're feeling emotional and you're like, I'm dumb and I can't figure this out. I was like, and I was on stream, right? And it's like, I was able to get up there, but then I couldn't figure out how it works because I didn't see that there were like the hand things that you're like, you got to jump to the ones that have hand holds on them. And I was like, I wasn't looking at that. And I was looking like, oh, this thing is shiny and it's lighting up. And like, that's weird. And so yeah, it definitely takes you out of the experience, right? And so it is good for me on the streaming side of things in order to continue doing stuff like this, to break it up, do fun, interesting things, right? Have weekly talk shows, do some multiplayer madness with some people that are like having some fun to break it all up because playing single player games a lot of times is you're doing a walkthrough and you're playing it and people are like, oh, I see you're playing and that's fun, but like what's next? So
Yeah,
it's all in all, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to add some new things in. We'll see what the future brings,
for
but we're
sure.
excited.
Yeah, for anybody that stopped in, we definitely were planning on playing Lego Fortnite, but then we ended up just talking games and enjoying each other's input and perspective on the titles we've been playing. So didn't get to that today, but it's all good. We'll be back in the near future, guys. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful morning. We also didn't do a gratitude rant this morning, and I had every intention to do a gratitude rant because, boy, we have a lot to be appreciative of in this life. Families, the ability to just play video games and enjoy the experience, happy, healthy, and food on the table. So, and that is a lot to do with your swell of gratitude that you've been delivering every morning, Phil. So, thank you for reminding us of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, look, all in all, you're talking about video games. You are, oh, and as you can see, my ring light just went off. Clearly, I need to charge that. Um, you you are talking about video games, you have your hobbies, you're in a place in your life where if you are in a place in your life where you're like, hey, I'm stable enough right now, financially, mentally, my family's good, I'm healthy enough, I got up this morning, I made it through the night, I'm up, I'm awake, like let's tackle the day, like you're doing all right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there might be some shitty things going on, and there's a lot of people that are going through a lot of really difficult things. And if you are able to find even 5 minutes to do something that you want to do with your time in your life, like you're doing good. You're gonna be okay. And a lot of that is what this is about. Is like we do have the time, and I should not waste it and be grateful and get up and work hard and find ways to do it. So yeah, we're both very grateful for what we have. I'm excited for this opportunity, and we will see what the future holds for both of us
I
in the
love it.
coming year.
I love it. Going to be a good year. Have a good day, y'all.
It will be.
Bye.
Peace.